And Ben Knight joins me now live from the Egyptian capital. Ben, those scenes at night looked extremely dangerous. How are things there now?
Well, they are fortunately improving, or at least that's the sense that I get this morning. That was leading into Saturday night, and that was indeed a very, very violent night. There were many deaths, there were many shootings, and that was the night that the criminals and the thugs were actually in control, and you had the citizens arming themselves with knives and with guns. And what was interesting is someone said to me that in Egypt, guns are not legal. It's probably similar in its gun laws to Australia. It is a very, very serious offence to possess one. Yet all of a sudden, in houses in every neighbourhood, suddenly everyone had one, legal or illegal. So that was Saturday night. Now, last night, we get the impression that it was a lot calmer. There haven't been reports of the same kind of looting or of the same kind of violence. Now, that could be because there are police coming back onto the streets. Now, that in itself is quite interesting, because it would be some kind of concession from Hosni Mubarak. But the situation this morning, it's mid-morning in Cairo, and as I look out onto the city behind me, there's actually a traffic jam. Now, it's not that all of the cars are back on the road, but there is a tank which has closed the main road into the Cairo city centre down to one lane. But there are a lot of cars behind it, so people have to go to work, people are trying to get back to normal. Something else, just below me here, I'm seeing that there's a truck, and people are cleaning up the street. Now, I was actually wondering how long this was going to take to happen, but we're starting to see heavy equipment moving into the city, and the carcasses of cars and trucks are beginning to be removed. So the atmosphere is changing, but the standoff is still there. And this has been the pattern. Calm in the morning, semblance of normal life, but then as people head back towards the square around the middle of the day, then you start to get the major protests, the mass protests. Now, what is also interesting is that the army is beginning to set up concrete barricades. As I came towards this office this morning, for the first time I was stopped by a soldier who wanted to see my identification. That hasn't happened before. So the army, rather than just sitting back on the tanks and lapping up the adulation of the people and calming things by their mere presence, appear to be taking a role in actually trying to control the centre of the city. We've heard that they're starting to put barricades in, concrete barricades around the main square. That is probably going to be the most interesting development of the day, because the square has obviously become the focus. Tens of thousands of people mass there every day because they have the freedom to do so. Today, if there are barricades there, that freedom may be taken away. And if the army is trying to prevent the people from getting into that main square, that is a big question about how the people will respond to that. They thought the army was on their side. They thought the army was there to protect them. If the army is now taking a stand on behalf of the Egyptian government, on behalf of Hosni Mubarak, and saying, no, you can't come in, that could be a flashpoint.
As you say, there is that sense of a standoff with everyone watching what the other players are going to do. Have you got any sense of who might break first?
Well, no, but it is interesting to watch the gradual drip of concessions that are coming from Hosni Mubarak. Now, this has obviously been compared to Tunisia, and with very, very good reason. I don't think there's any doubt that the uprising in Tunisia was the inspiration for what has happened here in Egypt. But when those revolts and those protests happened in Tunisia, the President, Al Abidine Ben Ali, very, very quickly came out and made massive concessions. He sacked the government. He promised that food prices would go down. A swag of concessions in very quick time. And it wasn't enough, and he left the country the next day. Now, Hosni Mubarak has been much stronger, and he has the army on his side. But I think with the pressure from the US, which has been growing, because I can tell you that Egyptians here have been deeply unimpressed with the approach of the United States in the early days. But the pressure from the West, Hosni Mubarak has been starting to make concessions. He sacked the government. But as far as people here are concerned, that just meant that he was appointing 32 more cronies to his cabinet. And what he's also done is said that the new Prime Minister will talk to other opposition parties. And in the words of Hosni Mubarak, I'm quoting from a transcript of what he said, this will achieve democracy. Well, clearly, the people on the street are not going to think that that has achieved democracy. And so Hosni Mubarak is making these little concessions, and if indeed he has started to send the police back out on the street, that's another one. But I can tell you it's not going to be enough to satisfy the crowd in Tahrir Square.
And just finally, you've covered this region, Ben. How is the chaos in Egypt being viewed by other countries in the region?
Well, I think there are a couple of interesting countries to watch here. There are quite a number of, obviously, autocratic or dictatorial regimes who are watching very, very nervously. But it's a different situation. If you have a look at the Gulf countries, you have monarchies where democracy has never actually existed. So if people don't have it, then they don't miss it, perhaps. And the countries there do spend a lot of money on subsidising the basics, food and fuel and things like that, to try and stop exactly this kind of unrest. But it's not the case in other countries. I think Israel is going to be extremely nervous at the moment. It has, obviously, a peace treaty with Egypt. Hosni Mubarak does not make state visits to Israel, but Hosni Mubarak's new Vice President, Omar Suleiman, does, and he does on a regular basis. He's the head of intelligence in Egypt, and he has a very good relationship with the Israeli intelligence authorities. So Israel has actually, we've heard reports in the Israeli press this morning that Israel has told its diplomats to get busy telling other countries and Western countries to just pull back on the criticism of Israel, because it does not want to see this kind of instability on its southern border. Now, on Israel's eastern border is the only other Arab country that has a treaty with it, which is Jordan. There have been protests there for weeks. They haven't been reported, but there'll be nerves there as well.
Ben Knight, thanks for that update.